And we are live. Everything looks good. Okay, awesome. Welcome once again to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. As always, I am your host, Duck, and we are in episode 14 for the year. Before we get started, just do a quick little thing here. Just a reminder. Oh, where's my switcher? My switcher's not working. There it is. Coming up with Milford Photo is a couple of beginner photo walks. So if you have any friends that are new to photography, especially those of you in camera clubs, and they're interested in learning how to use their cameras a little bit better than just kind of like winging it, point them towards Milford Photos meetup page. I got one coming up very shortly, June 6th, just around the corner. And then in a few months, in August, August 8th. Okay. All right. How's everybody doing? Did anybody get a chance to play with any of the new updated stuff that Adobe put into Photoshop? If you have any questions on anything we covered last week? No? It's all par for the course. At this point, you know, Adobe comes out with some updates, and it's like, yeah, okay. Right? I can't hear you, Alan.
Yeah.
They all came out with updates. Luminar came up with updates this past week, and so did Topaz.
Oh, okay, cool.
So
Yeah. So I don't know if they communicate or it's like they just know the schedule. All right, cool. Well, if there are no questions, let's move on to today's lesson. Today, I figured we'd go back to doing some editing and getting into some fundamentals. But I wanted to kind of push the envelope a little bit and try to delve into a little bit more advanced way of thinking. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with black and white conversion, creating a black and white image. But we're going to approach this in a slightly different way than I've done in the past. And what I did is I picked a really, really bad image. So let me go ahead and switch this over to the to my desktop. This is the image I decided to play around with. And actually, let me go to show the... This was from some many years back. This is kind of like a really horrific HDR edit that I did on this. I kind of pushed the contrast a lot. And as you can see, the subject matter isn't all that great. The presentation, the composition isn't all that great. But I like images like this that aren't so great. And the reason being is that when I'm presented with an image that is kind of, pretty bad, I try to pull out all the stops to see if I can salvage anything from it. The thing is, I know going into it that the chances of salvaging an image like this is probably slim to none. But it's a good exercise because it forces me to kind of think a little bit outside the box. And part of that has to do with the fact that I'm working with an inferior image to begin with. I'm working with something that I understand is an ugly duckling. I understand that the composition is terrible. I understand that, maybe the exposure capture was terrible. In this case, the exposure bracket just was like horrendous. But the reason I pick images like this is because it allows me to explore concepts, to explore techniques, to explore tools with a little bit more freedom, because I don't have an expectation of making a good end product. I don't know if that makes any sense to you guys. Whereas if I started with an image that looked really, really great in camera, my mind's already in a certain specific frame of mind saying, oh, all I need to do is tweak this and tweak that, and add a little contrast here, push the focal point here, and I'm done. When you start off with a really bad image, you don't quite have that clear of a roadmap. So now you have to kind of rely on pretty much every technique under the sun that you have available to you. And like I said, it kind of gives you a little bit of freedom to explore things that you maybe normally wouldn't. Because when you start off with a good image, you're not going to spend time exploring, because it's just going to make a good image bad. So you tend not to explore as often with a good image as you would with a bad image. All right. So that's one of the reasons why we're going to tackle this particular image, is that way you can see, kind of like the process. And when you watch me mess up royally, hopefully it'll give you permission to explore some images that might be in your catalog that aren't so great. And then in the process of, working through trying to create something nice out of it, you also learn something along the way. Okay. So hopefully that kind of makes sense of what we're going to do today. And I know it sounds a little bit weird, but let's just kind of, as they say, trust the process, shall we? All right. Any questions before we start?
Yeah, this thing that we're looking at right now,
Mm-hmm.
in an echo. This is the original photograph.
Yes. All right. So what I did is I took, here, let me show you. I took a series of bracketed images. And this is going back. Let me add a little background here. This is going back to 2015. 2015. This was when I was really kind of exploring new camera techniques, new digital techniques for myself. And one of them, I was playing around with HDR. If you recall, HDR was kind of the rage back then, and all kinds of HDR software. But nobody was really doing the exposure bracketing, the initial bracketing the initial brackets required for the HDR, they weren't doing it properly. And as you can plainly see in these three images, neither was I. Okay. So out of these three, obviously the one here down at the bottom is way overblown. Okay. But this was used to capture the shadow part. Actually, here, let me all right. So this was pushed so I can, capture any shadow detail in all the areas in here and the deep parts underneath the this roof line in the doorways and things like that. But because it's a snow scene, anything that had snow is blown out. It's here. Let me. Where's the histogram? Let me actually bring it into the develop module. If we look, everything that you see red is white with no detail. Okay. Now I can bring the exposure down. I can bring the highlights down. I can bring the whites down, and I am absolutely not going to pull any detail. All right, because there is no detail there to pull, even though I was shooting in RAW. It's just way beyond the exposure range of that file. Okay. So that's my for my shadows. Okay. This one here, this one was for my highlights. This was supposed to capture all the detail in the snow. Okay, and you can see that we do capture a lot of detail in the snow. Okay. It's kind of almost a little bit flat on the roof, simply because the lighting wasn't all that great. So we're losing a lot of the texture on the roof. And of course, it was a very overcast day, the day that I caught these. So there's really no detail up in the sky either. It's kind of very flat. We can see a little bit in the corner here, but I mean, looking at this roof line right here, that roof line just kind of melds into the sky. We really barely see that roof line division against the sky. So that was for our highlights. And then the midtones, this was the midtones. Okay. And again, I really wasn't, I really didn't know at the time enough about how to properly capture the required exposure ranges for a proper HDR. I just kind of did the traditional, find your exposure and bracket, up and down from there, which really isn't the best way to do it. But anyway, this one here also has, we're not quite blown out. All right. If you look over here on the histogram, you can see that, we are pushing the left and the right sides, okay, of our range. So we're not clipping anywhere, which is nice. So I can probably use this one. All right. But again, the purpose of this exercise is try to see if I can push the limits on a really ugly image. So For that reason, I kind of chose this underexposed image. Okay. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of background for what these images were originally used for. What was the mindset for the initial capture, and how I'm now kind of like using it for a new purpose. Okay. All right. So that being said, what I want to do is we're going to explore some concepts of black and white conversion. All right. Some of these I've covered in the past. Some of these you've probably heard other YouTube instructors, mention, like using the black and white color sliders and things like that. But I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to dig very deep into my bag of knowledge and hopefully teach you something that you may not be familiar with. And we're also going to explore some things that, hopefully explore some things that I've never tried before. So let's see what happens, shall we? Okay. So, where do we start? Okay, well, first off, why convert this to black and white? Why convert this to black and white? Okay. If we try to salvage this with, bring up the exposure, kind of add a little bit of contrast, see if we can bring our whites down, if we look at this, thematically, it's a winter scene. So right off the bat, the majority of the image is white. It was a cloudy, overcast day. So the sky is gray. And the subject is this fieldstone house. So while the fieldstones do have color to them, they're very muted. A lot of earth tones, a lot of browns, a lot of yellows, some reds in there. But overall, it's not what you would call a colorful image. Okay. So because of that reason, I think this would lend itself a little bit better for a black and white conversion. Okay. As you've probably heard it said, that black and white tends to hide a lot of imperfections, which is true. But, you shouldn't use it as a crutch. Hopefully you don't use it as a crutch to try to make an ugly duckling look good. But there is certain validity about minimizing, color flaws by converting it to black and white. And this is a prime example. All right. It's just not enough color information to make this interesting. So rather than try to create something interesting in a colored format, we'll just remove the color and make it black and white. All right. The first thing I want to do is I want to change the aspect ratio. I just want to make it a little bit more of that cinematic wide shot. Okay. And the other thing I want to do is I want to kind of get rid of this telephone pole over on the left-hand side here. See this kind of it's distracting. It just kind of pulls my eye out of the image. So I just want to get rid of it. Okay. And I'll just go ahead and use the the tools right in Lightroom. So right here, let's see, we don't have reflections, we don't have people, and we don't have a lot of dust. Okay. You can see that compared to Photoshop, these tools are a lot more lacking, and hopefully eventually they'll increase the capabilities of this within Lightroom, so that Lightroom and Photoshop kind of start matching a little bit more. But this is what we have so far. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and, analyze all this, get those wires. Oh, there's a wire here. The car in the background, the telephone poles, the wires. I'm not being overly careful, okay, as you can see, but we'll just see what it does. All right, and then I'll go ahead and click on remove. Give it a second. All right, it's going to do its AI removal thing. And like anything else, it's going to give you the choice of 3 variations, just like Photoshop does. 1, 2, and 3. And they're, ooh, that last one's pretty terrible. So between 1 and 2, you know what? I kind of like number 1. So we'll keep on that. We'll keep that one. And now it looks so much better. We don't have that, really strange junk in that far left corner, just, pulling our eye out. Okay. All right. Now, obviously, there's a couple of ways we can convert this to black and white. One, we can just take and get our saturation and bring our saturation down all the way. And then from here, we can, maybe play around with the contrast, the highlights, blah, 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 blah. Okay. But that doesn't quite give you a lot of control. All right. So one of the nice things about Lightroom is that we do have a black and white setting that we can convert to. All right. So let me go ahead and reset these settings, set the tone, all right. And before we even begin, what I might want to do is play around with the adaptive features of Lightroom. We have adaptive color and we have adaptive black and white. All right, so let's click on the adaptive black and white and see what it gives us. Okay, not very interesting. All right, as a matter of fact, it's still looking pretty underexposed. Okay. But the nice thing is that we do have access to our black and white mix panel, okay? And obviously all the other tools that we would normally have, okay? So this would be a good place to start, all right? Or we could, try to see what our adaptive color does, okay? And our adaptive color, not much better. Okay. So let's go back to our adaptive black and white and take it from there. Okay. Would anybody like to suggest a first step on how to make this a little better? Anybody want to throw out some suggestions? Everybody's going to be quiet. All right. If you recall, whenever I do any kind of editing on an image, what I like to do is call out the more obvious things about the image that are wrong. or what I look at as being wrong with the image. All right, so let's start there. What would you guys identify as being wrong in this image? And again, there's no right or wrong. Just call out what you think, all right, is wrong with the image.
For me, over in the right hand side, the bushes and the trees going up, they just
Okay.
yeah.
What about them?
They just sort of, it's not clear what's going on over there.
Okay. All right. So what would be a suggested way of alleviating that mess?
That's why you're here.
No. We're going to be exploring things, all right? We're exploring techniques. We're exploring our knowledge. We're exploring the tools, okay? So just throw it out. You're in a safe space here, buddy.
I don't know if any of these generative tools could just get rid of some of those bushes.
That's a lot to ask for the generative. Yeah, that's a big ask. That's a big ask. So, well, no, let's. Yeah. The other the other thing about the generative tools, when it's generating pixels that aren't there, it's fabricating fantasy. It's fabricating something that does not exist in reality. All right. It can extrapolate. It can make assumptions about what is there based on information that it's able to see. So, for example, it can see that there are these columns that are supporting that upper roof, okay? But because we can't see the bottom part of those columns, it's going to want to guess. Now, we can see, all right, if we actually look at the base of this column, we can see the base of this one column, okay? And we can probably, see the base of this cluster of columns here on the right. Okay, so we do have a little bit of information available to us so that the software can say, okay, well, based on that one column, if I replicate that look to these, I'll be in the ballpark, okay? Now, mind you, I'm also using the same train of thought if I did not have AI, generative AI capabilities, and I needed to use traditional skills to get rid of that bush, how would I do it? Well, I would look for these clues. Well, I can take the base of that column and kind of manipulate it and copy it across and blend it in. All right. We can also see that platform for that second floor, and we can extrapolate a certain amount of information. We can say, well, more than likely, because I'm seeing all those columns on the right-hand side, I can assume that floor extends at least over to those columns. Okay? That's fairly easy to assume, all right, based on what we're seeing in the image, right? But when we get below that second floor level underneath, it's completely obliterated by that bush. And for all we know, there could be, a stone structure. It could be who knows what. Okay. So at that point, we have to invent. All right. If I were doing this manually, I would have to invent something. I would probably get very creative as to how I invent it to minimize the amount of work that I have to do. Generative AI doesn't have that limitation. They can just completely invent something. And the problem becomes now is that we are creating a fantasy of something that's not there. Okay. And in this particular case, people probably wouldn't care. But if you were familiar with the site and you understood what the structure was like, the physical aspects of it, you might look at that and say, oh, wow, no, that's completely wrong. Okay. So you run into that problem. Okay. So there's pros and cons. Yeah, go ahead.
And maybe something I noticed at first, and when I thought I couldn't get it off my mind, and if we got rid of it, maybe not make this other thing, but that plastic chair has got no business being there.
No, you know what? I love that plastic chair being there.
Really?
Yeah. It just adds to the feeling of the derelict nature, of the abandoned nature of the structure. All right. To me, wow. To me, that's a story point. That is why. What is the story behind why there is a chair, just in the middle of nowhere? And actually, there's actually two chairs. So if we look, there's another one on the other side of that wall or foundation or whatever that is. Okay.
Well, taking your train of thought from the view, then looking at the derelict nature of things, then bushes are okay the way they are.
Yeah, true. But let's go with it. All right. You say we want to minimize it. So how can we minimize it without doing a lot of work and rebuilding it? What's another tool that's available to you? The lazy man's tool. What I call the lazy man's tool. Right? See what I'm doing? I'm cropping it out. Now it's no longer as obvious. Correct? Okay. All right. Lazy man's, yes, it's a tool. It's it's a lazy way of doing it, yeah, but it's effective, right? It effectively removed all that confusion on the right-hand side. Well, it didn't completely remove it. It definitely minimized it, right? Definitely minimized it. Okay. Now, you might say, well, why didn't we do that with the telephone pole on this side? Why did you opt to remove it rather than just crop it in? Okay. Well, let me bring this back out and let me crop. I will crop out all that telephone pole stuff. Okay. And what do you notice? Okay. What I notice is that we've instantly crowded the building into this space by bringing that border in. Okay. Now, why am I crowding the left side in, but when I crop in from the right side, I'm not using the same language. I'm not saying I'm crowding it in. Okay. Let's return this. Okay. Because if we look at it balance wise, we have a lot of open space. All right. We have all this open space here. Okay. And it's already very crowded here. It's already very crowded. Why? Because we're pushing all the bushes, the trees, all right? They're already pushed way well into that border, okay? As a matter of fact, I used the trees here in my composition. I used the trees as a natural stopping point, as a natural border, all right? So that when we come across the house, we hit these trees, all right? And because I'm not showing the other side of those trees, my hope was that your vision would return back. It would come across, hit the trees, and then come back in, all right? Because that becomes a natural border, all right? Does that make sense? Whereas in this particular case, had I brought the frame here, there was nothing there because all this, the gray of the sky here follows along here, the sky, all right? That's all used to pull the eye that way, all right? And the only thing stopping it is the actual physical frame of my image frame, okay? So having all this open space, now the eye comes out here and says, there's nothing to look at here. Let's pull a U-turn and come back, okay? However, had I put my frame here, or actually here, I'll do it. Had I put my frame there, then all of a sudden, my eye goes out, and because it's so tight, it'll probably just keep going. Hopefully, people will come back, but this is a very uncomfortable tightness. There's a very uncomfortable tightness, in my opinion. All right. And hopefully you guys can kind of sort of see that. All right. So for me, I like that openness. All right. Just to give the subject a little bit of breathing room. Okay. But closing this off, I am not as adverse to losing that as I am to losing the open space. All right. I'd rather lose all that jumbled mess than lose that open space. Okay. All it does is it shifts the subject over a little bit more in this direction. Okay. And it brings it closer, obviously, because we cropped in. All right. At least that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. Okay. Now, is it correct? Is that the only, true choice? No, of course not. It's very subjective. And this is one of the reasons why we experiment is, we can actually see the results of our actions when we make changes. Okay. All right. So we got rid of all that jumble. What else is wrong with this image?
Like it's not straight at all. It looks like it's cocked.
It looks like it is cocked, this doesn't it? I was looking at that earlier, trying to figure out. But I am shooting from a low angle and I'm shooting up. So we can see that there, the angles like here kind of tilt this way, and the angle here kind of tilts that way. Okay, which is a very common problem with architectural images. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Sometimes, you know, having that kind of keystoning aspect makes the image look a little bit more grander, a little bit more majestic. But I'm kind of in agreement with you on this one, Bob, that it kind of looks a little off. Okay.
Yeah, but when you straighten one thing out, you gotta copy it.
All right. Yep. But fortunately, we have a tool within Lightroom that allows us to fix this, and that's the that's the transform tool. All right. So the transform, we have this little kind of like tic-tac-toe symbol here. Okay. That allows us to place guides within our image that tell Lightroom that, you know, this should be straight up and down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this first set of columns here because I can see the columns on the second floor as well as the column on the first floor. And I'm going to pick the middle of the column as my guide, simply because the columns aren't straight. The columns kind of get thinner to the top. So I'm just going to use the relative center of that, whatchamacallit, of the column, right? Kind of sort of there. Oops, kind of sort of there. And I'm going to draw a line down and kind of use the center of the bottom column underneath. Okay. And if you notice, it didn't do anything. All right. For this tool, we need 2 of these lines. All right. So I usually go one on the left and one on the right. So we got the one on the right, kind of following the angle there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to this side, and I'm going to pick a line. It's a little bit difficult to see here, but, you know, I think if I pick a line there, oops. Oh, come on. There we go. And hit, all right. And then we can look at it and say, okay, does that look a little bit straighter? Yeah, it does. It does. Okay. All right. What else is wrong with the image that we can we can look to fix here? Nobody wants to be brave enough to yell them out. Come on, guys.
Not sure if the term's right. Contrast. It's hard to tell where the building ends and those trees pick up.
Oh yeah, we definitely have a contrast issue. All right. So what about the contrast? All right. If we look at the histogram, all right, up here, you can see that we have this would be what we call a high contrast image. Okay, and the reason we call a high contrast image, because if you look at the shape of our histogram, we have that valley in the middle. So what that is telling me is that we have a lot of dark pixels, a lot of blacks, a lot of dark shadow pixels, and we also have a lot of lights and highlights and whites. Okay, and very, very, very little in the midtones. So because we have these extremes, lights and darks, this is a heavy contrast image. All right. And if we look at it, the majority of the building, all right, especially if you do the squint test, if you kind of lean back in your chair a little bit and do a little and squint your eyes just a little bit, what this does is it reduces all the detail. Okay. It actually minimizes the midtones a lot more. And you're seeing this more like as a two-tone black and white. So we see this like just this stripe of black going across the middle with white above it and white below it. So what we need to do is we need to kind of find a balance where the contrast between our extreme whites and our extreme blacks a little bit more appealing, would you say? All right. So now we have to start making some decisions, okay, about how we're going to place our tones. All right. So if we're going to start exploring tonality, we have to start making some decisions. Okay. And what do you think some of these decisions need to be in regards to the tonality? Anybody, any clues? Just throw out what you think.
Need to see more definition in the bricks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There you go. We definitely should see some definition. All right. Because right now it's like, what is this? Okay. What else? What else?
When you first said the high contrast, I didn't think of that, but
Oh,
the
okay.
moneyness or the,
How did you view it?
well, not much contrast because I was mainly looking at the bricks and not paying attention to the
Okay.
roof
All right.
overall. But now that we look at it, it's kind of stark.
Yeah. And so like I said, if you do the squint test, that will give you an indication as to how you're doing tonally. All right. Because if you do the squint test and you see a lot of gray, that means that there's less contrast. All right. Well, let me take a step back, because contrast is one of those words that can mean different things in different situations. Okay. So overall contrast, talking about the lighting situation in our image. Okay. As the light hits our scene, it's illuminating certain things and it's causing certain things to go into shadow. Okay. We also have the luminosity based on the substrate of whatever the light is hitting. For example, the snow on the roof and on the ground is white, so it's going to reflect back a lot more light than, for example, the stonework, which kind of absorbs the light. Okay. So what happens is that when you have parts of your image that are very reflective and parts of your image that is very absorbent of light, okay, that's going to create a greater amount of contrast between the lights and the darks. Right? Then there's also the contrast on a more granular level in regards to texture. So, for example, if we were to just zoom in on the stonework, okay, we can see that the stones tend to be a little bit darker than the cement grout lines, right? We can see that. We can see the shapes of the stones outlined by the grout lines, okay? And if we squint our eyes, there's really not a lot of contrast there, all right? We have dark stone with dark to mid-tone cement grout lines, which if you were to put it on a scale between black and white, it fits well within that. So it's the contrast is a lot more reduced in the texture level of the image of just like the building alone. Okay. If we just shoot up a little bit here, and you're probably going to not be able to see this as easily on the video screen, but there is texture on the roof here. Okay. But it's very, 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 very subtle. Very subtle. Okay. I don't know if you can see that kind of texture there. Okay. So the contrast between the white and the very light gray is even smaller than between like the stone and the cement work. So the contrast here is almost negligible. Okay. So when you say contrast, you have to kind of be a little aware of what you mean by contrast, and part of it was my fault. I'm thinking overall contrast within the image. All right. So that's why I kind of called it a high contrast image, because I was looking up here at the histogram, and the histogram with that valley that says it's a high contrast image. Okay. All right. So what would be a fix? What would be a potential fix for this high contrast?
Well, I don't know, we could make the valley less. Get up.
There you go. How can we get that valley to kind of flatten out a little bit more? Okay, perfect. All right, so if we look at the histogram, all right, we see that we have high points in the blacks and shadows. All right, here, okay. We have the blacks and the shadows. Okay, and then we have our highlights and our whites that create the other peak. Okay, but as you can see, well, hopefully you guys can see. Let me see if I can. All right, half of that peak that creates the right-hand side is actually in our mid-tone range. All right, see the highlighted area behind it? Okay, if you recall, we have 5 sliders. We have blacks, whites, shadows, highlights, and exposure, which is actually our midtones. Okay, the exposure range is that middle part. Okay, and a little bit more than half that spike is well within that midtone. Okay. And if we go over one block, that would be our highlights. Okay. And we can see that the base of our histogram just kind of stops before it even gets to the edge of that highlight range. And then the final block is our whites. Okay. This would be anything that we would call white. All right, so what does that tell us about our image? What does that tell us about our image? When we're not seeing anything in the whites, but we have this big spike on the right-hand side. All right, guys, this is photography 101 here. We see that spike on the right-hand side. That's not going anywhere near that right edge. What's it telling us?
Yeah.
Just look at the image. What does it look like? Exposure wise.
It's overexposed.
Overexposed?
Well,
Is it overexposed or is it underexposed?
yeah, underexposed because then the snow would have been.
Right, snow is white, and here it's gray. Okay. All right. So that tells us that our exposure range is a little off. Okay. And again, we can kind of see this in the histogram where we see that big hump that should be snow, should be sky, because those are the two lightest parts of our image. They are well within almost to the middle of our histogram where the midtones lie. Okay. So we don't have a true representation of our light tones. Okay. So if we think about the full dynamic range that's available to us from white to black, we are grossly underexposed because we're not taking appropriate use of our whites. Okay, so what can we do? Let's bring some of that white down into that area. Okay. So what we can do is one of the easiest ways that I like to do it is I'll just come up to the histogram. I'll grab it and I will just start dragging it over. Okay. All right. And now we start getting a little bit into a problem. Okay. Start getting a little bit into a problem. All right. We start losing our subtle detail. Okay, so now what we need to do is let me go ahead and reset this. One of the things we can do is we can go back to the basic and say, okay, well, let's establish a white point and let's establish a black point. Okay, meaning we need to establish what the edges are of our exposure range within this dynamic range. Okay. All right. And one of the easiest ways to do it with Lightroom is we can use the Alt Option key on these sliders. Okay. So if we take, for example, the whites slider, all right, let's see if we can set our white point. All right. The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that these little squares up in the corner are highlighted. You just click on them so that you see that little white square on them. Okay. This are your highlight clipping indicators. So when I start to clip, you'll notice that red shows anything where the highlights have clipped, and blue shows where your shadows have clipped. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to press and hold the Alt or Option key, and we're going to take that white slider and we're going to bring it up. Okay. Until we just
see it show.
Yes, exactly. All right. So now if I do this, all right, It's too far. Exactly. Everything that you see white there is now white with no detail. It's clipped. All right. And if I let go, you see all this red stuff. Okay. All that red means that it has gone to white with no detail. There's no way in hell you're ever going to recover anything from that information from there. Okay. But if we start bringing it back, all right, till it just kind of disappears, all right, that sets our white point. Right now, we set our white point based on the math. Based on the math. That doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be the correct position or the final position for our image. All right. But this is going to be a starting point. Now we can do the same thing with our black point. Our black point is just the opposite. When we start seeing black on this white background, it means that we now have shadow detail that has lost any kind of information. So it's black. All right. See, if I turn this off, it's black with no detail information. Obviously, we don't want that either. So we're just going to bring it back until now. Here is where we need to make a little bit of the decision. Some people say, okay, if I bring it back till it just disappears, all right? See how it just kind of disappears? All right. We are at that cusp. Now, if you are the kind of person that likes a little bit of contrast in your image, the good contrast is where your black point is a little bit deeper than your white point, meaning that your shadows are going to be a little bit blacker in relation to what you do your white points are. Okay. Images tend to look a little bit richer when you have richer shadows, not necessarily when you have brighter highlights. Okay. So keeping that in mind, some images, if the deep dark recesses of your shadow area go to black, it's not going to be a deal breaker with the image. However, if they go to white, it tends to be a bit of a deal breaker. And we're kind of already starting to see a little bit of that here because we set our white point. And if we look at our roof line, yes, it's white snow, okay, but it's a little bit too white. Okay, we've lost a lot of detail. We still, you guys probably may not be able to see it. I can just barely see a little bit of detail, on that snow. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to kind of fine tune this a little bit. All right. And so what we've done is we've hit our black points, we've hit our white points. Okay. We still have two other sliders. We have our shadows. Okay. And we can do the same thing. We can bring our shadows until it just reaches in. And we can bring our highlights until it just reaches in. All right. But all that's done is it's created a lot of contrast. Okay. I actually want to see a little bit more detail in that, in the, like the roof. Okay. So for me, I wouldn't push that highlight up. I would do what Ansel Adams would call a little bit of zone manipulation, where you taking what should be one zone and placing it into a different zone. All right, so in essence, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my highlights. All right, let's bring our whites, bring our highlights down a little bit. Okay, bring our whites up. All right, and let's bring our exposure, oh, let's bring our shadows up a little bit. Okay, we're going to open up those shadows, and I'm going to take my exposure and I'm going to bring the exposure down. That means my white point needs to come back up. All right, in order to kind of preserve some of that information in that the roof. All right, the snow of that roof. All right, I don't know. Hopefully you guys, I don't know. Can you guys see that texture in there or not?
Not really.
Not really. Okay, but there's definitely texture all along this. Everything here. Yeah, you guys may not see it because of the video compression, but there's definitely. Let's see if we can zoom in. Can you see that texture now?
Really?
Barely? Okay. All right. All right. Well, you have to trust my word on this, but I'm definitely seeing a lot of snow texture here. All right. And oops, come on. And that's what we want. We want to kind of preserve that texture. All right. It needs to look like snow. All right. Snow isn't 100% white. Okay. So I don't want it to push that far right envelope to begin with. All right. So that's why I mentioned earlier, when it comes to your white points and your black points, you have a little bit more flexibility with the black point than you do with the white point. Okay. All right. One other, another technique that has been used. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and create a virtual copy. All right, let me. Okay. Here's a I'm going to work on this virtual copy just so I don't. Come on, I don't need that. Just so I don't destroy what we just did. All right, but I'm going to undo this tone. All right. I've noticed that there are some instructors that will teach where you take your blacks all the way to the right, all right, which brightens them up. You take your whites all the way down, all right, which obviously darkens them down. Oh, come on. You take your shadows all the way up and your highlights all the way down, okay? And then, you know, you can manipulate the exposure as seen fit, all right? Now, we'll just keep it there, okay? And they'll use this as a starting point, okay? And I want you to notice the difference between the previous starting point and this current starting point, all right? And what I want you to do is I want you to look at the histogram and tell me, what do you notice right away about the difference between the two starting positions?
Blacks are gone and the highlights are gone completely.
What's that?
The ends of the histogram are flat.
It's actually inverted. All right. Previous one, we had the two humps on the left and the right and a valley in the middle. This one's just the opposite. We have a hump in the middle and the valleys on the left and the right. So we've inverted the histogram. Okay. Now, which way is the correct way? Trick question. Which way is the correct way? What's that?
You're comfortable with.
Oh, yes. Whatever you're comfortable with. Whatever is going to get you to your end result. All right. Whatever method helps you visualize what you want to do with your image. Okay. For me, this would be a great starting point for something a little bit more artistic, because look at the detail that's popped out. All right. I can probably take this, brighten it up a little bit more, export it to Photoshop, and use it as a coloring book. All right. Play around with some watercolor brushes and just go to town. And this would be great, right? Or we can say, okay, well, I kind of like the high points and the low points on this. All right. I might want to, in this case, maybe, bring my whites a little bit more up. Okay. Maybe, I think I like where the blacks are, but maybe bring the shadows down just a touch. Okay. And maybe add a little bit of contrast, or maybe actually reduce the contrast. I think would do a little bit more justice. Okay. And now, all right, where's our original? This was our original. Okay. And this is our, oops, nope, that's not it. Where is it? No, that's not our original. Where's, oh, our original's being used. Okay. Let's see. Hold on one second. Can I do this with a virtual copy? Probably not. I'm trying to see if I can go to our original. Oh, come on. Our original view.
Telephone pole, right?
Yeah, it just goes to our previous state. Our previous state. All right. Yeah, virtual copies are a little weird. They kind of just default back to when you created the virtual copy. Okay. All right. So now from here we can, explore a little bit more. Okay. But it all depends on what you want for your end results. Okay. So let's go to the previous. I'm gonna keep this one, and we might kind of flip back and forth between the two. Okay. Because now, if we look at this, all right, our white point is good, our black point is good, but the shadow tones, the building's still looking a little bit dark. All right, which is what Bob had mentioned, way early on. Okay, so how can we fix that? Okay, well, we can fix it by opening up our shadows. All right, maybe just drop the highlights just a bit. Open up the shadows. Okay, and now it's almost getting to this state. All right, this state is probably a little bit more pushed. Okay, but we're almost at the same point. Okay, as a matter of fact, if we go to this one and we just drop our highlights and a little bit, drop our shadows a little bit more. Okay, increase our All right. And then go to our first one. Okay, we have two variations. One looks, this one looks a little flatter, in my opinion. Okay, but this is the one that we came in from that camel hump. All right, whereas this one came in from the valley. Okay, as a matter of fact, here I'm going to color code this one yellow, and I'll color code this one blue. Where's my blue? Okay, just so we can keep track of what's what. Let me bring that up. Okay. All right. What else? What else can we do to this? All right. Also, I want to point out, so far, all we've done are global edits. We haven't even touched any local edits with masking. Okay? None. All right. All right. Some things that we also haven't touched. We haven't touched texture or clarity, right? And something you guys may not be aware of that's, coming straight to the front of your brain is we haven't touched any of the underlying color. All right, because remember, we started with a color image, which is an oxymoron because of what do I tell you in color image is? A color image is the extrapolation of color based on 3 black and white images. All right, so just keep that in mind. Okay. All right. Now that I totally confused you guys, all right, what else could we could we consider as like wrong, or something that you don't like about this that you would want to fix? Here, let's go to the to this one here. Okay. What do you think?
Bring out some more detail in the clouds.
Clouds, yes. Yes. We kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier. Remember, we said that when we look right here, all right, that roof line kind of melded in with our clouds up there, right? So let's see if we can do something with those clouds. Well, let's stick with the global. All right, you mentioned texture of the clouds. Okay, but if we work with the texture slider, let's see what else it does to the rest of the image. Okay, so what I'm going to do, just for shits and giggles, is I'm going to take that texture slider and I'm going to push the texture slider all the way up, which is normally not suggested. All right, but this is black and white, so we can be very dramatic. And like, ooh, okay, ooh, before, after, before, after. Okay. Now, the reason I say it's not always suggested is because if we apply this much texture to a color image, it can ruin it very, very quickly. But for some reason, like I mentioned before, when it comes to black and white, you can get away with a lot more than you would with a color image. Okay. Now, this might be a little bit too much. Okay. But we'll see. We also have clarity. And if we punch that up, all right, clarity is just this kind of like micro contrast. And you can see that as soon as I start bringing that up, notice all the blue coming out in the windows, and these are all the deep shadow areas of our image. Okay, that's that micro contrast that I discussed earlier coming into effect, because all it's doing is it's darkening those deep shadows, okay, and brightening up our brights, okay. And now you can see it clearly in the shadow area because we crossed that threshold of going from shadow into black with no detail. Okay. However, in the highlights, because we were well within that far right wall, even though we've pushed the white more towards the highlights more towards the white, we're not clipping because we were well away from it. But if we were to zoom in here, come on, let's zoom in here. All right. Let's see if we can do this. All right. You can see how we gained all that texture, especially along around the edges. All right. You guys should be able to see that texture clearly now. All right. But there's a bright spot right here. Okay. There's a bright spot. That's because some of this has been pushed to the white. Okay. Not quite up against the wall, but very, very close. All right. If we look here, you can see that spike very, very close. And we see that little triangle there. All right. The triangle hasn't turned red, but that's a warning that we are very close to clipping. All right. With no chance of gaining any information back. All right. So just that's how you read that. All right. And we can actually see it here where a lot of that texture is now starting to blow out a little bit. Okay. So like I said, I probably wouldn't push it that far. Okay. And if you guys recall kind of my rule of thumb, it's by no means based on anything scientific. It's just kind of like my rule of thumb. Whatever I apply in texture, I tend to apply half of that in clarity, right? It gives me just enough crunchiness, all right, without it going too crazy, okay? And like I said, we're not going to go overly heavy with the texture. I brought it back to about 50. And my clarity is going to be about 25-ish. Okay. All right. And you can see, we got some blue there, but again, I don't care. This is shadow detail. I don't care if that goes to black. It doesn't really matter to me. It's not going to affect my image all that much. But we've gained a lot of micro detail, micro contrast in the image. Okay. All right. What else you guys think? Oh, well, I'm sorry. Let's tackle what Brian said about the sky. Okay. So Brian, how can we correct for that?
Still on global.
We're still global, but we can do whatever.
That texture did quite a bit for us.
It did. We can see it, especially in this open area to the left. Okay.
Some dehaze.
Dehaze. Ooh, dehaze. Let's see what dehaze does.
What was that?
Okay. All right. Yeah. So dehaze is actually going to create some problems for us. Here, I'm going to turn off these highlights here. We don't need them right now. Okay. What is the dehaze tool designed for? Anybody remember?
Atmospheric.
Yes, it's supposed to kind of remove any any excuse me, any washing out of colors caused by atmosphere. All right, especially whenever you see anything through that haze with your normal eyes, colors look less saturated. Tonally, things kind of get a little bit more washed out. All right. But it tends to really be noticeable in the light tones than in the shadow tones. All right. As far as that color desaturation, right? When we look at anything through with a haze and the shadow or the darker tones, all right, we don't necessarily get that desaturation. There is that desaturation going on, but we also notice that the dark tones have like a film of gray over it. If we were to, really analyze it and give it kind of some kind of descriptor to it, all right. Blacks are no longer blacks. They're kind of like, depending on the time of day, it could be kind of like this bluish gray bleh, tone to it, right? So the dehaze slider kind of tends to remove that gray cast, all right, by increasing a little bit of saturation and decreasing the luminosity, all right? And we can definitely see that in effect here, right? When I push it to the max, we can see how it just kind of darkens everything, all right? What it's doing is it's getting rid of that very light gray, okay? However, we're running into a particular problem with this particular scene because I am shooting at 25 millimeters, all right, on a 2470. I'm at 25 millimeters, okay? So I'm actually getting a little bit of natural vignetting going on here. See it, how these corners are darker?
Yeah.
I got a natural vignetting going on here from my lens. So how can I fix that? All right, well, let's
What
see.
happens
Let's
when you
bring,
start playing with the colors. The blue color.
oh, that's a great question, but let's fix the vignette first and then we'll tackle that.
Okay.
All right. Or are you saying the blue will remove that?
I don't know how the three colors are going to affect the overall.
Okay. All right. Let's see what this looks like in color. All right. If we take the woo, yeah, look at that blue in the corner. So yes, Bob's onto something. Look at all that blue in the corner. It's definitely affecting it. Okay. But before I go to the blue, Bob, I'm going to tackle the fact that I know my lens was really, really wide. Okay. And that vignetting is probably being caused more by my lens. All right. The reason I can effectively say that is because I'm looking at the shape. I'm looking at the shape that is being caused here. And even though there's trees here, all right, I can kind of sort of see it on this side as well. Not so much this far in because remember we cropped it, but if we were to uncrop it, all right, actually here, let's uncrop this. And we go back. See how much darker that is in that corner? right? That's because of the lens, all right? So we actually have a tool for that, all right? Anybody know what it is? Lens correction, okay? And you can see it was not activated, all right? Simply because when we started this whole exercise, I just kind of reset everything back to flat default, okay? But normally when I import an image, I will make sure that one of the things that gets done on import is my lens correction. So let's click these on. Remove chromatic aberrations, which we don't have to worry about. We've kind of converted everything to black and white. And enable our profile corrections. Ooh, look at that. Look at that. Did you see that? Look at that jump.
Yeah.
All right. Look at the barrel distortion that gets fixed. Okay. And then we lose that vignetting in the corner. All right. Now, if it's too bright in the corner, we can remove some of that vignetting just by this little slider here. All right, we can bring some of that back in if we want. Okay. Personally, I never do this. All right, because if I want a vignette, I will add the vignette myself. I'm not going to rely on some glitch of the lens to do it for me. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So
that before.
And yeah, typically that would be done before I even do anything else. But we're kind of experimenting here. So in this particular case, you know, anything goes. And if something pops up, we just deal with it. So what popped up based on that one little change we did with our lens correction? Okay. And if you want, I can show you before and after. Okay. Once we remove that vignette, what's that, Bob?
It brightened the outside edges.
Yeah. It brightened it
equally.
Brightened it out. It equalized, yes. It equalized the brightness. Okay. So when you initially see that change, your first instinct is, "Ooh, now the image is too bright." Okay. But here's where I warn you. All right. At that point, you might want to step away from your computer, go get something to drink, go to the bathroom, do whatever, and come back. All right. And then your eyes will have readjusted. And now when you look at it, hopefully you'll have forgotten how dark it really was in the corners. And the readjusted eyes will now look at this a little bit differently. So yeah, it is a little bit brighter. Okay. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay. All right. So good call on the blue color. And that was awesome. All right. And we'll get more into the color in a little bit. All right. What else? Oh, let's go back to Brian with the sky. What else can we do to the sky? Brian's being shy.
Well, when you did that other thing, yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to got rid of the texture, but we lost some of it in the sky.
Yeah, we lost a lot of that texture that darkness brought out. Okay, so how can we bring that texture back? All right, if we think about what we lost and apply what we lost in that corner, all right, how can we take what we lost and apply it across the entire sky?
Brightness change all our white points.
The brightness, the overall brightness changed. Okay. So what happens? Actually, let me turn this off. What happened is because everything's a little bit darker, okay, we can see the contrast of that sky a little bit more, okay, because we're now being able to see the shadow parts of those clouds a lot stronger against the lighter parts, okay. As soon as we brighten it up, that contrast got diminished. All right. So in order to recoup that texture, we need to bring some of that contrast back. Okay. The other thing I would suggest is right now, we mentioned it earlier, the roof line kind of melds into the sky. Now, where the trees are, it allows us to use psychology, all right, to kind of outline where that roof line is, because we see the roof line and we see the trees begin. We know those trees actually continue behind, all right? And even though the gaps in between the limbs where we see sky, even though the sky color and the roof color are the same, right? Our mind can differentiate that division of roof to sky because we're seeing those branches. Those branches are telling us that's the roof line, okay? We don't have that all the way on the left-hand side. All right, so that's why we notice that roof line kind of disappear into the sky a little bit more prevalently. Okay, so what happens is our eye can travel upwards, and if we notice the lower part of the sky down here, all right, is dark in comparison to everything up here, right? Where it's a lot lighter, okay? And typically what we want to do is we want to flip that. We want to flip that, all right? Because what happens is we'll go from the dark to the light and our eye will continue up and out of that frame. We want something so that when we come up here, it forces us to come back down, okay? And typically what we require for that is some kind of dark patch or darkness to bring us back into the lightness, okay? Does that make sense? All right, so what tool can we use to bring some of that contrast back and add a little bit of darkness to that upper edge?
It's a job for the linear gradient.
It's a job for the linear gradient. Absolutely. All right, let's go to our linear gradient. And we're just going to go, I'm going to hold the shift key. The shift key allows me to drag it down in a straight path. Okay, now if you notice, we're going to grab parts of our roof line, but we all know we can get away from that with other tools. All right, so what do you want to try, Bride? This is your call. We can work with our tonality. We can go with texture or clarity or dehaze. What do you want to give it a try? This is all experimental. Anything? You're muted.
My first thought was to make it vignetting. So would that be or taking the shadows
Taking the shadows down. Okay.
and
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that look okay. So now if we notice, pay attention to the tonality. Oh, why am I getting an arrow? I don't want an arrow. The tonality up there, which was very bright, could barely see any tonality, to this part here where we see it's a little bit grayer, and we see a little bit more texture, right? These two have kind of equaled out, which is kind of nice. All right. And what I did is I actually brought the shadows, maxed out on the shadows. Okay. So what else can we do if the shadows isn't enough?
what is it, black?
The black point? Okay. There we go. All right. Now I'm going to ask you a very technical question, and see if why the black point and the shadows and not the exposure slider.
You really want to hear my answer?
Yeah, your answer. Yeah.
Because I always save the exposure slider to last.
Okay. Any particular reason, or it's just that's habit?
It just seems like doing the exposure first doesn't work.
Okay.
Get to the result you want.
All right. No, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. What I like to tell people is that, and you've probably heard me explain the accordion effect, the spring effect. All right, because all of these segments, the black, the shadow, the midtones, which is the exposure, the highlights, and the whites, they're all connected. They're all attached to each other. When you slide one, it affects its neighbors immediately. All right. And its neighbors also get affected just a little less. Okay. So what I tend to do is I tend to not just look at the tonality that I want to target, but I want to look at its neighbors because I know its neighbors are going to be immediately affected. Okay. So in this particular case, I know the majority of that upper sky is very, very bright. It's in the whites and highlights. Okay. And as we get lower in the sky, it starts creeping into the midtones, the exposure part. So I tend to say to myself, okay, if I don't want to affect the whites because it's a bright sky, I'm just looking to increase the contrast. The contrast is how can we separate the shadows from our highlights? If we make the shadows a little bit darker than the highlights, we increase contrast. Okay. So I don't want to darken the sky too much. I want to darken it a little bit, but not too much. What I actually want to do is I want to darken the texture. I want to darken the shadow parts of those clouds. So I'm going to go to the point furthest away from that target, okay, which in this case would be my highlights, okay. I'm going to go to the farthest point. I'm going to start there because when I move that slider, I'm not pushing my shadows in the brights areas. I'm pulling them. I'm pulling them towards the blacks. Okay. And it's a very subtle move. All right. So you're on the right track. Okay. And hopefully I gave you a little bit more understanding on that. Now, remember, We also are touching a little bit into this upper corner of the roof line where the roof kind of touches the sky. So let's get out of here and let's take a look at that. Okay. And we can see that it's also darkened. It's also darkened that corner. All right. So we need to make a decision. All right. Because we did show the overlay. Okay. We did darken the roof along with the sky. All right. Let's. Okay. So right there. Okay. So now we have to and the snow on top of the chimneys. Okay. So now we have to ask ourselves, am I okay with that? Or do I want to avoid that? All right.
Avoid it.
Avoid it? Okay, cool. So we need to subtract from a mask, and I'm just going to use the brush just to keep things simple. I'm going to erase that section of the roof. All right, and that little bit of chimney. Now, I'm not too concerned about the trees. The trees are already in silhouette. And, you know, I'm not going to go to all that craziness of trying to remove anything on those trees. Okay. Let's go ahead and zoom out. Okay. How's that look? That looks pretty darn good. Right? What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, you're getting some definition of the roof line.
Yeah, we got some definition along that little bit of the roof line. Absolutely. Now we can go back and we can play around a little bit. Now we have that mask. We can say, okay, well, how far can we go? Now you have to be careful you don't go too far because you're going to get these haloing around certain things, so you have to be careful. Okay. And let's see, we bring the blacks down. I also don't want to turn the clouds gray. All right. I just kind of want to bring more texture. All right. So let's try texture. Let's see what that does. Okay. Now remember, we've already added texture once globally. All right. That doesn't mean we can't add texture, some more texture. Okay. And actually, yeah, that looks pretty darn good. Okay. We try a little bit of dehaze. Oh, actually, the dehaze is looking pretty good on that part. It ruined it when we did it globally, but here, because we're basically just targeting the bright parts of the sky, that doesn't look too bad. Okay. Unfortunately, in the middle, there's really no texture there to bring back. So I don't think anything we do will ever bring anything into that area. And hopefully you guys can see it right in here. Okay.
You do that too much. I think you'll bring the trees out.
True.
When it'll start bringing them more prominent instead of being subdued backwards.
Correct. All right. But, that's one of those things that we have to kind of weigh. In this particular case, it's a black and white image. All right. We can see about, well, let's see if we take we do another mask. Let's try creating a mask based on where is it? The select landscape. Let's see if it'll do anything with those trees. All right. And this is where experimentation plays a big role, because now, again, you have a very ugly image that we're kind of, to use the old adage, throw crap against the wall and see what sticks. That's basically what we're doing. We're just throwing stuff against the virtual image wall here and seeing what sticks. Okay. And it's taking a while to analyze this image. I don't know why. Come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Here we go. All right, vegetation. Oof. Okay. All right, I'll create a mask. Let's see what happens. All right, we are going to subtract. All right, from this mask, we're going to subtract a luminance range. All right, and I wanna pick just like the brightest parts. There we go. Okay, did everybody see what I just did there? What I'm doing is I'm just removing some of that bright areas. Okay. Okay. And then we're going to just keep it to the upper part. So if I press and hold the Alt or Option key, I get the intersect. All right. See that? I can't do it with my, okay. Press and hold the Alt or Option key, gives me the intersect, and we're going to intersect it again with a linear gradient. Okay. And I'm just going to bring it to that upper part. Okay. And what I want to do is I just want to tone down the black. So what we're going to do is just going to take those and we're going to brighten it up just a little bit. Okay. All right. Everybody see that? All right. So before and after. Before and after. All right, so that looks very heavy, dark-wise. All right, and just by brightening it up a little bit, we kind of just open it up a little bit more. Okay, but that makes the building very heavy feeling. All right, so all right, what else can we do? We're on a good roll here, guys. What else? Oh, we can go back to the sky. All right, actually, let's go ahead and call this sky. And we'll call this one, come on, double click, trees. All right, we'll go back to our sky, maybe darken it up a little bit, the upper edges. All right. Just a touch, a scotch. Okay. What do you think? Bring our trees up a little bit more. All right. All right, anything else? What else? Got a few minutes. What's that?
I think you got it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Last thing I want to touch on, which we didn't play around with here. Let me just go to this image. Let's apply our lens correction. It looks a little bit flat let's go to our dehaze. Yeah, kind of, sort of. Okay. What we didn't, excuse me, what we didn't touch on is the underlying color. Now, if we turn this off, we can see, heavy color. The saturation's been pushed up. Okay. We can manipulate the underlying color to create certain levels of contrast. For example, the first level of colors we can manipulate is our temperature and our tint. Temperature affects the blues and yellows, all right? Tint affects greens and magentas, okay? By sliding one way or the other, we're adding green, or we're adding magenta, or we're adding blue, or we're adding yellow, okay? But because we're working in black and white mode, we're not going to see the actual color, but we're going to see the effect the underlying color has on the black and white tonality. Okay. So for example, if I push things into the blue, okay, you notice how certain things shift. And then if we go to the yellow, okay, it kind of shifts another way. All right. So going into the yellow, we lose a lot of the contrast in the highlight areas. Okay. Where we go into the blue, it kind of gets a little bit muddy up there. Okay. Let me return that to where it was. And then if we look at the green and the magenta, all right, there's not a lot of green underlying here. All right, so we're not going to see a drastic change. Same as with the magenta. But as soon as I take it off, you can see how that influence really just, all right, see how it influences the bright areas with that blue? That's going to have an effect on the tonality of our black and white, okay? Same here, okay? That red is going to have a radical influence on our black and white. So we can use those underlying colors, okay? And I'm actually kind of liking how that heavy magenta is making the image look. Okay, we lost a lot of detail in this in the roof, but we're playing. The other thing that's very obvious is, of course, the black and white slider. Anything that is overall red is going to be affected. Now, if you recall the original image, there wasn't a lot of red in the sky. Okay, so why is it affecting that sky? Well, it's because we added red when we pushed the tint into the magenta. Okay, magenta is a red color. Okay, without that magenta, we don't have that influence. As soon as we go into the magenta, all right, which goes through, a heavy red section, all right, we get that heavy influence, but we also get it on the building, okay? So they all interplay with each other, okay? They all interplay. Orange, all right, yellows, all right, we kind of removed a lot of yellows when we pushed it into magenta. There's really no green. Notice the green doesn't really do anything. Same thing with the aqua. All right. Same thing with the blue, because we effectively removed any of these, what would be the cool colors. So the aqua, the blue, the purple, and the magenta, that'll definitely be very affected because we added a lot of magenta. But even the purple, it's going to have minimal influence. Okay. Let me just return these back to normal and go back to our black and white. Okay. In this case, the orange and the reds will definitely have a little bit more effect. The blue, little bit of effect because we have blue in the sky. All right. Even though it's gray, there's blue in that gray color. All right. Purple, yeah, there's a little bit of purple in that sky. And magenta, there's a little magenta in the foliage down there. Okay. All right. Now, the one that most people kind of tend to overlook is this last one, which is our calibration. Calibration. All right. Now, we know there's blue in our sky. So if we take that saturation up and down on any of these channels, we're going to see that it affects it. Okay. But that's the saturation. We're not really concerned about saturation in this case because the saturation is being handled by our black and white conversion. However, the slider above it is the hue. So we have our red primary, so we can go more red or less red. Okay, more red, less red. All right. I'm kind of liking the more red. All right. And then we have the green. There's a little bit of green because skies tend to have cyan. So there's a little bit of green in the sky. And I think I like the sky a little darker than brighter. All right. And then we have our blue. All right. Yeah, I think I like the blue on this opposite side because it really brightens up that image, the snow. Okay. So if we were to turn off, all right, that's kind of what it looks like. And you can see the colors are all over the place. There's a lot of magenta in our sky. There's a lot of green on the building. Okay. It looks gross. It looks completely gross. But as a black and white, we bring out a little more of that texture, a little bit more of that local contrast. So before, after, before, see, kind of a little muddy looking. After, it's got a little bit of punch. Okay. And of course, at this point, you would go and work your local adjustments. All right. So we do our local adjustments, maybe bring our shadows down, open up the blacks. Okay. Maybe increase or decrease. I say decrease the contrast. Okay. All right. And shake and bake from there on. All right. It's now 8:30, so time to start wrapping it up. All right. Any questions on anything we covered? All right. Now,
Not a question, but I have an interesting observation.
sure.
For the Addams Family,
The original series or?
black and white.
Yep.
I saw an article about what the set of that place looked like.
Oh, yes.
Do to make the black and white look right.
I saw that same article. The colors were horrendous. They were horrendous, but they photographed beautifully in black and gray. That's a great article to read in regards to this black and white conversion. Now, Alan, I know you have your tools that you like for your black and white conversion, okay? But the same principles still apply. The underlying color does have its effect, all right? Now, in this particular case, the exercise we did today, we manually manipulated our tones. When you use a preset, somebody did that for you already. All right. So if you can go into the presets and kind of deconstruct it, you may be able to tweak it by going into very specific areas instead of just, relying on the strength slider for that preset. You can go in and manipulate maybe the blue channel or the red channel or the green channel to bring some aspects of that image out a little bit more than the preset can give you. Okay? Because I know one of the defaults is, well, this preset doesn't make it look good. I'll try the next preset. Okay? So hopefully this gives you a little look under the hood of what makes a black and white, and then you're able to fine tune those presets a little bit more. Okay? All right, any questions? I actually like this a little bit more than the other one. Okay, let's try. Bringing. Ooh. Wow. It's a little strong, but let's see. Bring the no, let's bring this. Oh, you know what? I'm going to leave that there, and we're going to go with the tone curve. We're going to go with a tone curve. There we go. Oh, whoa, no. Let me reset this. How do we reset this? Reset. We're just going to bring this up a little bit and bring that down a little bit. There we go. Okay. Voila. Ta-da! All right. Okay, guys, that's it for today. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of inspiration to take some of your ugly throwaways that are like sitting in that bottom drawer that you don't want to open. And just reach in, grab an ugly one, and see what you can do with it. All right. Will it ever see the light of day? No. This image is not salvageable, but it was fun to play with. It was fun to experiment to see what we can actually do with it. Okay. All right, guys. Any last minute?
Watching television.
What's that?
Watching television.
There you go.
I mean, nuts.
There you go. There you go. All right. Any last minute questions? We're good? All right. We'll see you all not next week, but the week after. All right.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Hang on, Alan.
Okay.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.